Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Grigg. I am the career advisor here at the college. As we pointed out, welcome to everybody there that's viewing from home or from your classrooms. Just a few ground rules before we get started today. I'm a pretty informal guy, and I know it's important that you ask your questions quickly, especially when I present some information you might have a question on. I just ask you guys, if you can, try to write them down, and then at the end we can talk a little bit more about those questions. If it's something pressing and you just got to know, it's totally fine. But so that we can keep moving, keep in mind it's a lot of material. Interviewing is a very big subject that if any of you have been in our resume workshops, we barely do that in an hour. So to make sure we get through this in an hour, I'd like to try to keep moving, because some of you might have to go back to work or classes, and I want to make sure we're honoring your time and making sure no one's late. Also, before we get started, anyone interested out there or anyone here in the room interested, we've got Wendy's coming to campus on Tuesday. They're looking for managers, assistant managers, and supervisors. Really decent paid jobs with benefits. So if you have any restaurant background and you're interested in a leadership role, it's going to be in the Medlin building on Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Definitely what you learned today is something you should bring to that event, because it's going to be group interviews where they interview the group, and those that stand out will be interviewed one-on-one. Interviewing is a very, very sensitive, hard topic. You know, I work in the field, and I still get terrified when I go into an interview. Let's face it, when we really want something and we're put pressure on about getting that something, you know, we can practice for hours, and when we get put into that situation, there's times where we can lock up, where we get nervous. So what we're going to talk about today is the types of questions an employer typically asks. We're going to look at ways on how you can kind of control that nervousness and making sure that we're rehearsed, that we're ready to go, so that when we do get nervous, we fall back on what we know best, or what we should know best, which is ourselves. And you know, as it says here on the introductory slide, the job interview can make or break a hiring decision. So it's truly important, guys, that we master this side of the job search. For those of you that have come to the resume workshops, we also have those coming up next week. The resume should be the easier part. It's the objective part. I've worked with some of you in this room where we've submitted resumes, applications, and the purpose of that process is, objectively, do you have the skills to do this job? I gave you a job description. My job as an HR representative is to determine, do you have the skills to do this job? If you make it to the interview, that's where things become more subjective. That's where I'm trying to identify, out of everyone that I'm meeting with, who's the best fit for my department. Something that kept coming up in our workshops last night was a lot of uncomfortableness, a lot of insecurity about, do I really have the skills to beat my competition? And I keep pointing out to that group that if you didn't have the skills, you wouldn't be in that interview. So it's important that you come off likable, that you come off in a way that's a good fit for that organization. And let me move to the next slide here. All right, guys, so before we get started, why interview? And I'll go through this slide pretty quickly for the sake of time. But interview is really important. There's an interesting statistic I looked up the other day. Out of 15 surveys that were analyzed, 15 surveys for $8 an hour jobs, it costs an employer about $9,444 to replace an $8 an hour employee. For the average nurse that leaves my organization as I've trained them, it costs about $40,000 to replace that nurse. And it goes up higher and higher the more advanced that educational level is. Obviously, the lesson is, it costs money to bring you on board. $8 an hour cost me $10,000 to get you on board. I'm gonna make sure you're the right fit for my company. And I do that through the interview process. So are you a good fit for my company? Are you a good fit for my department? If you're in an interview where a lot of interviews come on board and you get onto an interview, a lot of interviews today are panel interviews. So when you ask, why do I have to take that public speaking class at Guilford Tech or UNCG or whatever school it might be you're going to in the future, when you take that, that's why. Because all a panel interview really is public speaking, except people are asking you questions as you're moving along. So, you know, coming off likable is so critical. I'm going to be working with you for a long time, right? It cost me $10,000 for an $8 employee to come work with me. I see it as, when I hire you, we're going to be together for a while. And I've got to make sure that we're going to get along. So in an interview, if you're negative, if you come off in a way that makes me uncomfortable or my panel members uncomfortable, you know, I'm going to think, do I really want to work with this person in the future? Or is this person going to be a good fit for my team? So likability is so critical when it comes to an interview. How to communicate in person is really important. Yes, please. How to communicate in person is a big one as well. With the resume, I know that you know how to communicate in writing. Thank you. I know how you communicate in writing. On your application, that's why you've gotten to the interview. Now I need to know, can you communicate not only with my customers, but can you communicate with me? Can you communicate with your future team members? And a lot of students I've seen in the past where a resume gets slid across the table and they go, there's my skills right there. It's all right there on paper. Well, I know what your skills are. I need you to tell me what your skills are. I need you to communicate with me. You know, we live in an era where we text. I'm a victim of text messaging, of emailing. And, unfortunately, the interview is very personable. And I've got to be comfortable fit for that company or I don't move forward. The other side of it is, anyone ever been pulled over by a police officer and the police officer asks you the same question 7 different ways? Where are you going? And then they'll ask it a different way, and then they'll ask it a different way. And by question number 5, you're like, haven't I already answered this question? They do it for a reason. Why? To see if you're lying to them. They do the same thing in an interview. Your resume is right in front of them, and they begin to ask you questions. Oh, so tell me where you've been. And then they'll follow up in a different way to ask the same type of question. Are you telling the truth? Right? It cost me $10,000 for that $8 employee. I know times are hard right now. Although they're improving, they're still hard. People are going to say what they have to say to take care of their families, to get a job, to provide for themselves. And it's my job in HR to make sure that you are telling the truth. So in an interview, eye contact is critical, and we're going to talk more about that here in a few minutes. What sets you apart from your competition is also something I use an interview for. Remember, everybody that came in has the skills. I need to know the diamond in the rough. I need to know who stands out. Who's that person that I really want to invest that $10,000 to bring them on board? And last but not least, will they stay working for my company when I hire them? And I can ask questions about your past, about your future ambitions and goals, and make a pretty good determination on whether or not you're going to stay with our company. And I'm going to give you a few examples here in a few minutes on ways to kind of avoid that and make sure you're answering the question in a way where I feel secure that you're going to stay on board if I invest in you. All right, so next slide. Okay, guys, so before the interview, and if you're not taking notes, I recommend at this point that we start taking notes. By the way, I'll give you my email address at the end of this session, and we're also going to quickly talk about how those of you out there can get gift cards just like the folks in here. We have one to give away, and we've got to make sure that you're emailing me to give me your name and your email address, of course, so that I can get you a certificate of completion and get you in the running for the free $25 gift card. All right, guys, so before an interview, one of the most important steps, of course, in anything is preparation. All right, research, research, research. How many of you guys research before you go to an interview? All right, making sure you know everything about that company inside and out. Making sure that you understand where the company's been, where the company's going. And the big one on that one is where that company's going. Because you're going to be asked the question, and we'll talk more about it, on why you want to work for my company. You better know what I sell. You better know what I do, because if you don't, the interview is going to end right there. I might ask you 2 or 3 more courteous questions, but at the end of the day, if you don't know what we do, I'm not interested in meeting you. So making sure that you know inside and out what that company does, what they produce, their mission statement, their goals for the future, what they've accomplished, these are really important because you're going to kind of get an idea of who I should be in that interview. And I always use Facebook as an example. If I come to an interview to work for Facebook and I'm wearing the Armani suit with my hair slicked back and I'm super professional and uncomfortable, what kind of company am I applying for? I'm applying for a company that strives on creativity, that strives on people to be different. I used to work at Hard Rock Cafe and it was the same thing. We'd have folks come in the polo and the nice khakis with the hair nicely combed and they wouldn't get the job, but the people with the tattoos and earrings would be hired. Why? Because it's a rock culture. That's the culture of that organization. So if you don't know that, you could be walking yourself into a situation where, no matter what you say, you're not moving forward. Guys, review your resume and your job description before you interview. Guys, I cannot emphasize this enough. The first thing you do when you apply to a job is I print that job description, and me and that job description become friends forever. I need to know specifically not just about myself, but what I've done in the past that relates to this job. All right, so making sure that you know inside and out as much as you can on what this employer is looking for, and we're going to talk about why that's important. Guys, identify common questions and rehearse. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to rehearse. I don't know if anyone's been in a public speaking class. I know when I was in college, there was always the people that got up there it was just hard to watch them, and you could always tell who hasn't practiced. They'd get up, they do the ums, the likes, they're looking down on the floor, they look over here, they're scratching their head, give me a moment. And instantly, you realize they're not confident, you realize they haven't practiced, that things don't flow. I get people all the time say, hey Dan, how do I stop myself from saying like and Well, you're saying like and because you're trying to think about what to say. If you would rehearse it over and over and over, eventually it comes out naturally. I'm not a good public speaker. I've just done 100 million resume workshops and interview workshops in my time, and that's why the information flows. Why? Because I know the subject. It's really strange how little we know about ourselves until we take a step back and analyze, what have I accomplished? What have I accomplished that's in relation to this job? So making sure, guys, that you rehearse over and over and over, whether it's in front of a mirror. I drive. I just leave, I turn off the radio, I drive, and I'll say the question to myself and then answer it. And it looks kind of foolish, I'm sure, to people driving up to me thinking I'm talking to myself, but it really does help. And I'll say an answer and go, you know what, that's kind of coming off cocky. No, I don't like that. I don't sound confident enough, so I'll keep working on it so that when the time comes, I'm ready. Guys, create an outline or some talking points. When you give a speech, if you take your public speaking class, they don't want you to write a script and get up there and read verbatim. The employer's not looking for you to come up to them with questions and already have answers written out, and you're just reading them off a piece of paper. But bullet points can help you to stay on track. I always tell students, they think, I have to go to an interview and I can't bring anything. And that's not true. You can bring a notebook. You can sit down with that notebook and have your list of talking points so that when you do get nervous, you really want this job, you can say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Can I have just a moment? Take a step back, take a deep breath, and get yourself back online looking at those bullet points. So don't feel like you have to go in unprepared when you go to that interview. Last but not least, I know it's a common one, but look, when we get nervous, we don't think about it. Guys, you have to sleep. You have to eat before your interview. Remember when we took tests in high school and we got to lecture for like 2 weeks in advance? Make sure you eat breakfast. Make sure you get a good night's sleep to take your test. Same thing with the interview. I mean, if you come in looking fatigued, if your stomach's growling when I'm waiting for an answer, that could distract my attention as an employer, and obviously your attention is distracted because you're thinking, man, I'm ready to go eat lunch. So making sure, guys, that you're taking care of yourselves before the interview. Okay, guys, so here's some examples of questions that are commonly asked in an interview. These are what's called traditional questions. They're usually always brought up at some point in the interview. And obviously, what's the number one question they always ask when you come in? Tell me about yourself. You can't avoid it. You can't escape it. I'm so passionate about what I've done, what I do when it comes to career services, because everything I talk about, I failed miserably many, many, many times. And I've actually failed on this question. And I'm the type of guy where when I want something, I'm just like you. I get very nervous. And when you don't think about this question, you start to make mistakes. And you say things that you shouldn't say in an interview. Because remember, the interview is not personal Dan. It's not Dan at home. It's not Dan at church. It's not Dan and his activities outside of work. It's professional Dan. The employer doesn't want to know that I'm from New Jersey, that I'm Catholic, and that I have 3 kids and a dog at home, okay? Now, I've seen it happen where people give out that information because they're nervous. They say, tell me about yourself. And you say, hi, I'm Dan Grigg. I'm really nervous. I'm from New Jersey. I'm Catholic, and I have 3 kids. And on the other side of the table, some employers might think, hey, I'm atheist. I'm not Catholic. Hey, he's got kids. Is he going to come to work? My kids watch the Jersey Shore, and I can't stand those people from New Jersey, right? So thinking about, be careful what you tell them. Everything has to be professional. Remember when I said, look at that job description? That's how you answer this question. So for example, if I'm applying for a warehouse job, a good answer to this question would be, hi, I'm Dan Grigg, firm handshake. I have over 5 years experience working in the warehouse industry. I'm currently forklift certified here in the state of North Carolina. I've experience using pallet jacks and other warehousing equipment. I also have a significant experience, about 2 years, of managing inventory. Do you see where I'm going with that? Everything comes back to what I'd read in that job description. They're expecting me to say, what do I have that works for this company? All right? So be careful, guys. That's a really important one that you practice, and you make sure that you don't get nervous and give out too much. I'm not telling you not to be human. I'm not telling you not to disclose anything about yourself, but you have to be careful. You have to make sure, even if the person on the other side of the table isn't discriminating, It's basic interview etiquette. And if you start to tell me those types of things, I see a person that doesn't really want this job because they're not prepared for this interview. All right, guys, who hates this question? What are your weaknesses? It's probably hands on the other side of the camera up everywhere. Once again, am in the industry and I cannot stand this question. You know, they want to know, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? Here's a tip. Strength should be related to the job you're applying to. So for example, if you're a medical student, you're applying for your first medical job, my strength should probably be my exceptional customer service skills, right? All right, my weakness should be a true weakness. It shouldn't be a weakness that I make up. So we have an employer panel last November, and one of the companies, it was Patriot Staffing, when we asked them this question, said they cannot stand it when they ask a student a weakness and they say, I'm a perfectionist. Or they come up with something that instantly the light bulb goes off and I know you're making it up. You're not telling, what is your true weakness? That's what I want to know. The key is that I don't give you, for example, if it's a customer service job, I shouldn't say, well, I'm not a very patient person, or I don't like to work with people, right? That shouldn't be the weakness I use, but it should be something real. The key with the weakness is that you always follow up immediately with how you're fixing that weakness. Okay, so let me give you an example. So they'll ask me my weakness, and I say, in the past I've had problems with organizational skills. I've had a problem with keeping up with multitasking. And over the last few years, I began to embrace the technology offered through my organization. When I first started here, I saw technology kind of as a way that held me back. It was something I was scared of. I attended a few trainings at my job, and now I'm so confident using it that it's helping me to stay organized. I use my Microsoft Outlook calendar to keep up with my appointments. I use Microsoft Excel to make my inventory process more efficient. And I feel like I'm really improving, using technology and even to-do lists. You see where I went with that? I spun it. This is my weakness, but quickly, this is what I'm doing to fix it. If I just say, I don't like people, and then I stop and it gets quiet and awkward and we stare at each other, some employers aren't going to be nice enough to go, so making sure, guys, that instantly the weakness isn't directly related to the job, and instantly this is how I'm working on fixing that problem. Why do we want to work here? Why do you want to work here? One of the most important questions. You have to know my company. You have to know why it is you want to work here. Just saying to me it's because you need a job, just saying to me because you like warehousing, or you like medical, or you like retail is not enough. I need you to tell me, why is it you want to work at this company, not in a specific field. Great example of a student I worked with in recent history, a great example of passion. And this student had come to me for over a year, and the last 2 or 3 times he came to me, the only resume he wanted to make was a resume for Duke Energy. He did not want to apply to any other company. It was just Duke Energy. And it blew my mind, and I worked with him. And believe it or not, true story, 2 weeks ago, Duke Energy called me about coming to our job fair, which is March 20th. Definitely write that date down, March 20th. And I had the opportunity to say, hey, while you're on the phone, this guy I've been working with has been coming to me for about a year, and he only wants me to help him make a Duke Energy resume. And she was blown away. She goes, just that, really? And I said, yeah. And she instantly went forward to her recruiters, and he started the interview process. He started going through that whole process. I don't know if you guys know this, but Duke Energy is not an easy company to get on board with, especially when you just cold call them. Guys, that's passion. That's a reason to want to work. She asked me, why is he so interested? And I say, hey, he's got friends that work there. He understands the culture. He loves the way that he hears your employees are treated. He loves the way you lead. They love that. They love that you go above and beyond just looking at my website to learn about my company. Guys, be passionate about why you want to work for a company. Remember, I'm looking for the diamond in the rough. The diamond in the rough. Guys, tell me about your employment history. Be very careful with this. Make sure you tell the truth. I used to work for JobLink down in Charleston, South Carolina, and all of our truck drivers, all of our CNAs, and any other medically sponsored programs, we were required to run a national FBI check. And I had never known this. Not only can I see what you've been arrested for and what's happened in the past, but I can see everywhere you've ever filed your taxes, ever. People always come to me and go, are they going to run a background check 5 years? No, back to you're an adult, just like your jobs. And I know where you've been. Now look, you were at Applebee's for a month, you didn't tell me about it. I don't think it's the world's biggest deal. But if you're at Applebee's for like 8 months and you kind of failed to tell me that information, that's a major red flag for me. So think critically. Look at your resumes now. If I have some gaps, start to think critically about what was I doing during those gaps. I want to be able to tell an employer I was doing something. It wasn't just watching The Price is Right in the afternoon or Maury. I was actually out doing something, coming to Guilford Tech, volunteering at my child's school. Guys, if you have to say you're a homemaker, that you're at home with your child for the first few years of their lives, it's better than you kind of running away from me and not answering that question, because the most important thing is that I know where you've been. And you have to be able to express that to me. So making sure that you think critically about your employment history and that you always tell the truth. You could say 2010 to 2012 you worked there, right? That sounds like 2 years to me. But when I look at the months, it might have only come out to be a year and a half. That's a big difference when I'm considering whether or not to hire you. So call your HR departments and say, when did I work there? I know it's embarrassing. I've done it, all right? So making sure that you follow up. When was I there? When was my start date? Guilford Tech's application, what's the day you started and the day you left, not just the month and year. So start to think critically about where I was and what I was doing. Guys, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Remember we talked about this one? Remember the $9,000, $10,000 for my $8 employee? Your answer better be with this company, and it better not be my job. And that's where research comes on board. Who's interviewing me? And you go, I want to be the director of operations. Well, I'm the director of operations. You're intimidating me right now. Maybe I won't bring you on board. So making sure that I know who I'm interviewing with, and then I want to be with the company. Coming up with reasons on why you want to move into a management position. If you're nervous that who you're interviewing with is going to be the job you want, just say you want to be a leader within the organization. But you have to say you want to be there. I've had students in interviews where they'll go to like a culinary. I think the one interview I worked with was a catering company. And they said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And they said, I hope to own my own business and do the same thing you're doing. And the employer went, wow, so you're looking to come on board here with me to see what I do right, steal my trade secrets, and do the opposite when I do things wrong, right? Never tell an employer that you want to start your own business when this venture is over. You want to be working for that employer. Remember how much it costs to turn you over when you do leave. Last but not least, guys, tell me about your education. Guys, don't just assume that I know what your education is about, okay? So if you got an accounting degree from Guilford Tech, it is very different than an accounting degree at Guilford College. Take the time to sell me on what you learned from that program that makes you relevant for this job. And take the time never to assume that I'm going to know that. Anybody have a class before where they say, I know what the American Revolution is. I need you to write me a paper and tell me that you know, right? And it's the same thing on an interview. You have to make sure that you're never assuming anything about that I know about you or what you've accomplished. All right, guys, so we've moved past the traditional. Now we're moving on to what's pretty relevant today when it comes to all interviews. It's called behavioral interviewing. And this is hard, guys. This is definitely where we want to take some notes. Like I said, I'll give you the PowerPoint after the session. I'll be glad to email it to you if you'd like. Guys, the theory is that based on your past performance, I can determine how well you're going to do here at my company. And what I mean by that is some examples I've given here on the slide. So traditional question would be, how well do you work under pressure? And you would have some sort of answer. You would say what you had to say in order to make me happy. With the behavioral, it's much different. So instead of just asking you a specific question, now I'm asking you, give me a time or an example that you did this and tell me why. See how it becomes much harder? How do you work under pressure? Well, I work well under pressure. I feel like I'm pretty confident in working under pressure. I've worked in manufacturing. Yeah, I'm comfortable working under pressure. Now tell me an example. And that makes it much, much harder. If you haven't thought through behavioral questions, I'm telling you what, the interview is going to be very painful. And I've been there. They asked me a question, tell me your greatest accomplishment and why. And man, that was a hard one for me. You think I would know my greatest accomplishment in that interview, and I didn't. And it turned out, I ended up spending a minute trying to think of my greatest accomplishment, which is an embarrassment in itself. And then the greatest accomplishment I gave had nothing to do with the job I was applying for. Guys, you've got to think critically, and I've got a few examples of our behavioral questions, okay? Common behavioral questions. Anyone working with a customer, a patient, you're in sales, guys, they're going to ask you, tell me a time you had someone that was really upset, you had a disgruntled customer, how did you handle the situation? Start thinking about this one now. If you're going to write any of these questions down, write this one down right now. That one and your greatest accomplishments, because they're going to ask you, I promise you. They want to know a time that you dealt with someone that was hard to work with, and how did you handle it? They might say, tell me a time you had a bad coworker, and how did you handle it? And it's really important that you articulate yourself well, that you've thought through this example in advance. so that you can answer the question. Keep in mind, sometimes the example's not as important as the how you handled it and the why, okay? So definitely start thinking about, tell me a time I had someone that was upset, how did I handle it? Give me a time, give me an example of a time you were asked to be a leader. All right, I've seen this where people, I'm just that $8 an hour employee, but my supervisor had to leave due to an emergency, and as a team member, I'm expected to step up, and they're looking for that type of thing. So think about a time you were asked to be a leader when you weren't supposed to be a leader, and think about how you reacted and how you helped that organization. Remember, when you're asked these tough questions, the fallback for you is follow the company's policies and procedures, follow the training that the company gave me. So keep those in mind. If you write those down, I think that'll help you. You ever come across a tough question? I had a guy in a workshop last night asked a question in a prison system about what would you do if a prisoner got out and attacked you? And the guy looked at him honestly and said, I'd shoot him. I don't even know if that's possible. I don't know if they have guns. And look, the honest level, what he meant to say was, I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself and the other people around me. But instead, he answered in a way that was just not what the employer was looking for. He should have followed back on, at that moment, I'm going to use my training and the policies and procedures you've given me in my training and make a decision on how to stop that prisoner from hurting myself or anyone else. And I'm sure there's even better ways to say it, but see how I fell back on your training is going to make me prepared and previous training. All right, guys, how do you handle a challenge? This is going to come up. Thinking about some major challenges you've had in the past and how you kind of overcome those challenges. They might ask you, tell me about multitasking. A big one is organization. I've gotten this on just about every interview I've been in. Tell me about how you organize things. Give some examples. Think about how you stay organized. I use a to-do list. It's so old-fashioned, but I love it. I pull out an old-fashioned piece of paper, I write to-do lists, and then I write out what I've got to do that day. It's how I start almost every single day. Believe it or not, most people don't do that. They go into the work environment, they try to wing it. That's where mistakes are made. It shows that you're analytical. It shows that you're thinking ahead, that you like to plan, and that's important. Last but not least, guys, it's just like your weakness. It's the tough question. Tell me a mistake you've made, and how did you handle it? Guys, we all have a weakness. We've all made mistakes. The only way you learn is that you make mistakes. So thinking of a mistake that's not gigantic, that's going to turn the employer off from moving forward with you, but being real. Once again, look, this was the mistake, and this is instantly what I learned from that mistake. My philosophy is that an interview is a frame of mind. I can choose to be negative, or I can choose to be positive. I could look at a termination, or I can look at an arrest, or I can look at a mistake in my life that the employer pulls out of me as a negative and blame it on others, blame it on people, or I could look at it positively and accept that and say, this is the mistake I made, and this is what I've learned from it. Remember that weakness answer. Everything falls back on, there's something I can take from everything, and this is what I took from that scenario. All right, guys, so reality. You get into an interview, you can't think of all the behavioral questions, all right? The big ones like we talked about. Tell me a time you're a leader. Tell me a time you had an upset person. Tell me your greatest accomplishment. But guys, they're going to ask you some that really just blow your mind. I've been on an interview committee recently where they've asked, tell me a time that you hired someone that was a mistake and how did you handle it? Man, that's a tough question. I'm the one helping to ask the questions, and I'm thinking, man, I hope that never is asked of me. That's a really hard question. Guys, this is called the S.T.A.R model. If you're taking notes, now's the time to take the notes, okay? It's called S.T.A.R. The S stands for situation. All right, so you describe the situation to me. T stands for task. What was my task based on that situation, right? Action. What was the action I took to fix that situation? And last but not least, what was the results of my actions? So remember I said come to the interview with your notebook. Write this out. S.T.A.R. Situation, T task, A action, R result. When you're asked a question that you're unfamiliar with, that you haven't quite prepared for, the key there is remember there's no one in the back of the room timing you. And they ask you the question, they go, you've got 5 minutes and 33 seconds to answer this question. You're like, oh my gosh. And you're trying to answer the question. I see people in interviews all the time. It's like a race. It's like, I got to say it quick. It's okay to say, hey, you know what? That's a hard question. Do you mind if I have a moment just to think of a good example for you? Take a moment, a deep breath, and pull up your notebook and look at S.T.A.R. I do it like this. I make it easy where I'll say, okay, the situation was this. Looking at my notebook, the task was this. The action I took was this. And the results of that action was this. You see how it makes it so much easier? Have you guys ever been told a story? I've got so many family members that do this. They tell a story and they just, well, wait, actually, this is what you need to know about him. And well, this is what this is. And well, that's a different story. But Billy does this. And you know how they keep getting off track? And by the end, you have no idea what they're talking about? It happens all the time. It's called rambling. All right. And I've got a family that's devoted to rambling at family functions. And with family, it's fine. But in an interview, remember, they're people too. And the second you start going into details that I'm confused about or telling a story that doesn't make sense to me, you've lost me. All right. So guys, use the STAR model. Let me give you an example. All right. So I own my own restaurant. I'm a manager of my own restaurant. I'm a manager at Wendy's. I'm the general manager they're interviewing for next Tuesday. I've got my own restaurant. I got a big problem. Corporates come down. They've interviewed my people. They've interviewed our customers. And we've got a 47% satisfaction rate. Horrible. Horrible. And Wendy's is looking at me, so the situation is I've got a 47% satisfaction rate. My task from corporate is to fix it, to make people happier with the services coming out of this restaurant. The action I took to fix this situation was that I created a customer feedback system where I could properly identify which one of my employees was being this way, who was providing this terrible customer service that led to this situation, the 47% satisfaction rate. Once I identified who they were, I was able to bring in a training program that retrained them and helped them to be more successful. My philosophy as a leader is not to punish, but to train, to help people grow within my organization. The results of this feedback/training system led to a 97% satisfaction rate on our last survey. Do you see how that went, guys? I said the situation, I said the task, I said the action, and I ended with the results. Remember, guys, although teamwork is critical, in this question, I want to know what you did on your team to make that happen, okay? I'm a big team player guy, and in my interviews, I make sure to say things like we and my team, because look, let's face it, I'm not the Steve Smith of the Carolina Panthers, I'm me. And I'm a part of a team no matter where I am, and when I'm in that interview, I have to talk from a team player perspective. What I don't want to do, guys, though, is kind of talk so much about the team that they can't figure out what I did as a part of that team, okay? So making sure that on the STAR questions that you're making sure that you're answering, that you're tooting your own horn. I've been on interviews recently where people have not tooted their own horn. They haven't come off confident. And it's because they're humble people. And unfortunately, guys, you have to be humble, but you have to be confident. You have to sell yourself because remember, I'm looking for a diamond in the rough. All right, guys, so during the interview, always smile. All right, remember, you're going to be with me for a while. And if you're frowning and you got a grimace the whole time, you don't look like you want to be there, well, man, what are you going to look like when you're on the job and you have to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and be with me here for 8 or 10 or 12 hours, right? So make sure that I'm smiling, that I'm presentable, that I'm comfortable to speak to. Make sure that I leave my cell phone in the car. I know the PowerPoint says turn it off. Leave it in the car. Seriously, what is so important that you need to have your cell phone in your pocket? And the last thing you want to do is have the theme song to MacGyver playing while you're answering a question in your interview, right? So making sure that you leave the cell phone gone. Guys, handshake. Can't express how important it is to have a nice, firm, comfortable handshake. Don't break my little hand, but at the same time, I don't want, to be soft. I get nervous, so I get the sweaty palms, so I leave a napkin in my pocket. Before I go in there, I'm drying off my hand. I am actually Catholic, and when I go to church, we have to shake hands, and every time I'm like, making sure my hand isn't sweaty when I'm nervous. So making sure, guys, that you're keeping your hands, like I said, non-sweaty, that you're doing a good handshake, maintaining eye contact. Guys, I cannot express how important this is. I'm not asking you to look at me like this while you're speaking, but at the same time, I am looking at your eye contact to tell whether or not you're lying. Look, I don't have to be a police officer and get training to know when someone's lying to me. The whole time you're looking at me, and then I go, well, hey, you got a gap in work history here from 2008 to 11. What's going on? Your eyes are going over here. It's because you're thinking of something to tell me, right? Because you didn't practice, you didn't rehearse. So, guys, making contact is really important. If you're on a panel interview, all right, and you ask me a question, I start by answering, looking at you, but I'm addressing everyone with my eyes as I go around the room. I've been on interview committees where someone asks a question and I'm over here and I'm like, hey, I'm over here too. Hey, I'm on the decision process too. Look at me, I'm here too. Really, I'm telling you what, eye contact's so important. You have no idea. Listen very carefully. Anyone been on an interview where the employer talks forever about their company? I've been on interviews where they talk for like a half hour and I'm like, are they gonna ask me questions? And I'm wondering, but this is great. If they decide to start by telling you about the position in the company, This is where your notebook comes into play. Start taking notes on things that really stand out to you. Remember, guys, when you're in an interview, it's not just about, am I a good fit for the company, but is this company a good fit for me? And I'll talk more about that in a moment. The best types of questions you can ask at the end of an interview is something based off what the employer already said. So the employer says, hey, we use this type of machinery, and I'm writing it down. I'm hearing, I've heard of that. I don't know a lot about it. And at the end of the session, I look at the employer and say, hey, you had mentioned earlier that you use the RQE machinery process when you're making a product. I've used the BCR product. Can you explain to me how they're similar? Wow, that really goes a long way. It shows you're a critical thinker, shows that you're listening. So guys, listen very carefully when an employer is speaking. This is probably one of my biggest mistakes because I get so nervous and I'll do really well with my answers and they start speaking and I've been in where I'm worried I didn't hear the question because I'm so nervous and they're speaking. I'm like, and the mouth's moving. Making sure, guys, you're taking deep breaths and you're listening carefully. Guys, give good examples. Good examples. Remember that storytelling I talked about. Make sure any examples you use, I get it, it's simple, it's understandable, and that your story is S.T.A.R, clear and concise, from beginning, middle to end, and S.T.A.R will help you with that. Guys, don't ramble. Don't be like my family. Making sure, guys, that when you get nervous, you ramble, right? I'm sure we've all been there. We had this guy back at JobLink, and I loved him. And we would do mock interviews, and every time he would do the S.T.A.R, is what we called it. And he would interview the people in front of the group, and there would always be someone that would get up there. He'd ask a question, they'd answer his question, and then he'd stare at him for 10 seconds. Just awkwardly, just staring at him, going like this. And everybody that did it, including me when I first practiced them, would start to go, and I did this too. And then you just keep going, and it turns into this like 20-minute, long-winded ramble. And at the end, he would always look at him and go, no one to stop talking. No one, keep in mind, they're writing down things about you. They're processing what you said. Give them a moment. If they get quiet for a moment, it's okay. Always remain positive, guys. I cannot express how important it is to always remain positive about everything you've ever done in the past. Remember, there's something you can learn from everything you've done in the past. Think of something horrible that's happened to you, whether it's on the job or personally, and I know that if we thought about it critically, there's something we learned from that experience. And that's what the employer is looking for. I'm with you all day. I don't want someone that comes in and goes, can you believe they're cutting jobs again? Or can you believe that they're not giving us that training they promised us? And it's always that negative person, that negative Norm or Nancy that brings the whole department down. So guys, be positive. And last but not least, who are you? Ask for a business card. Tell me some information on how I can contact you after this session so that I can thank you. And we'll talk about that here in a moment as well. Guys, what should you ask? Please ask a question, all right? They want to know not only, A, you should be making sure that this is the company you want to work for, but B, I want to make sure I'm hiring someone that wants to work for my company. If they're not asking me questions, that's probably an indication that they're just looking for a job, right? So someone that asks questions shows ambition, shows an actual interest in the job. Ask questions. Guys, some of the big, with the questions, you want to make sure, what are the expectations of this position? This is a really important one. The second bullet there, describe an average day of work to me. So I've got the job description. I understand what I read, but could you elaborate a little bit more on what I'll be doing with this? Just the basic. Explain to me a days of work. I had a student I helped with his resume about 2 weeks ago, and he was looking to get into the warehousing field. Had really done a lot of assistant manager stuff, and was just ready to just move up to be the boss, to be the director, to be that warehouse manager. He interviewed with a company, did an excellent job, got the job, was so excited, and then he finds out on his first day of work that there's only 3 people working there. And guess what? He's one of them. So it's the guy that owns the company, him, and someone below him. And he didn't ask the question, is there room for advancement? Number 3, is there room for advancement? Guys, he got on board with this company, and the frustration just flowed. Because simply all he had to ask was, hey, what's the size of your company? About how many people work here? Hey, is there room for advancement? Do you have a training program that encourages people to become supervisors? Well, not really, because we're a company of 3 and I'm the top person, right? So you're making sure you ask these questions. It's not just about, will you like the job, but is there anywhere for me to go when I come on board with this job? When you are looking to fill this position, guys, I always have students that come to me all the time, probably once a week, twice a week. Someone will come in my office, tell me about an interview, and I'll go, well, hey, how did it go? And they'll go, well, it went great. I feel really good about it. And I go, okay, great. What's the next step? And they go, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you'll know? And they're like, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to call me. I don't know if they're going to mail me. I don't know if they're going to email me. I don't know if it's going to be in a day, a week, a month. And then they start turning purple and red and freaking out. And they're like, what do I do? Then they ask the question, well, what's the etiquette? When is it okay for me to follow up to find out I got the job? Well, who cares about etiquette? If you would ask that question, you wouldn't be freaking out about when they're going to call or how they're going to tell you if you weren't hired. So guys, number one question after your other questions is, what's the next step? What's going to happen? If they say, we'll call you if you're hired, then you follow up with, I don't mean to be rude, but, will I find out if I'm not hired? And if so, how? Are you going to mail a letter? Are you going to send an email? It's really important, guys, that you ask this type of stuff, okay? For your own sanity, don't forget, guys, what happens next? We just talked about why it's so important. Will there be a second interview? I've been on interviews where there's 3, 4, 5 interviews. There's a company in Charleston that literally had 7 interviews. One's with the team of who you'll work with, one's with your direct supervisor, one's with the manager. Then there was 2 levels of testing. It was literally like a 12-hour day of unpaid being there. And we used to have students come back all the time and say, I made it through round 3 and I couldn't take it anymore. So making sure that you ask this question, always thank the interview, or the person that's interviewing you. And send them a thank you email. I always have folks, they say, well, I'm old fashioned, what about a card? And I encourage you, hey, if you want to send a card and go that far, I would do it. But I would not use it as a substitute to that email. Why? Because I get that email instantaneously, and I always use that email to sell myself again. So I'll say, hey, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview today with you and the committee. I'm confident that my last 5 years of warehouse experience and my forklift certification have prepared me for this role. Thank you again, and I look forward to your response or your decision on this process. Right there, not only do they remember who I am, but I'm selling myself again, and I'm showing them more ambition. So making sure, guys, that you use an email format, and that's why it's important that I ask for that business card, or I ask, if it's a panel, I don't have to ask for everyone's contact information. I can ask for one, and in my thank you email, just say, could you forward this out to the panel? Thank you. Don't, guys, ever talk about money, all right? Don't talk about money. It's not something you're supposed to ask in the first. I know it's the only thing on our minds when we're in the interview. You're doing well, you feel like it went well, and all that goes through your mind is, when are you going to pay me? When are you going to pay me? What, am I going to be able to live? Are you going to give me $8 or $25 an hour? Guys, you've got to hold off. My philosophy with the interview is that it's all about what I can do for you and less about what you can do for me, at least that first interview. People ask, can I ask about benefits? That's why they have websites. Get on the website and see. Typically, these companies always post what type of benefits you'll get as an employee. But I would try to keep it all about the company and not so much about myself. Guys, don't talk negatively about previous employers. We've already discussed it. Obviously, I'm making a point to re-emphasize being positive. There's not a bigger turnoff than that for an employer when you start to talk negatively about previous employers. Never seem too overconfident, okay? It comes off, and it can happen really quickly, really, really quickly. And I think the fine line for interviewing, and this comes back to you rehearsing and practicing, is how do I remain humble but sell myself? Right? And that's what you have to keep practicing. And if you don't, you could easily come off as overconfident. And I'd much rather work with someone with less confidence than with overconfidence. Because that overconfident person, no matter what you say to them, is always going to be that person, right? But the less confident person, I could probably help them grow. So guys, try not to come off overconfident. We're going to talk in a moment about clothing. Employer panel, last semester, really weird. I said, what's the biggest no-no on stage to an interview? And all 4 of them said their biggest pet peeve is people that come in smelling like perfume and cologne. And they said, my eyes are burning, and you're answering the questions. You could be the world's best applicant, and all I'm thinking about is getting you out of my office. So guys, keep it easy on the cologne, on the smells. Obviously, the other side, we want to make sure we shower. Hopefully the folks at home and you guys here in the room, we've all got this flyer. If you don't have a flyer, let me know, and I'll get it back to you here in just a second. If you could pass this back for me, that'd be great. This is a Dress for Success flyer. It's a pretty big workshop, and it's a really important point. And I know a lot of us know it, but some of us don't. And it's really important that you take this flyer with you, that you review it. Some great etiquette on how I should dress, how I shouldn't dress. I'm going to give you a quick example. Show of hands. I know you folks at home can't answer, but how many of you been to something where you were overdressed, where you went in and you were the person in the tie and everybody else had just a t-shirt on, right? Okay. It was embarrassing. Tell me, have you guys ever been in a situation where you've gone and you're the one underdressed and everyone's in a suit or a tie and you're the one in the t-shirt and jeans? Pretty embarrassing as well, right? I would rather be the one over-prepared any day of the week. And this isn't an assignment in school. This isn't me looking cool in front of a group of peers. This is a job. And business is business, and I want this job. And if you're not going to hire me because I slicked my hair back and wore a suit, hey, then maybe it wasn't the right fit for me. I've been in an interview where everyone in the room was in a suit, and I had a tie on, and the whole time I was waiting, I'm thinking, I'm done. Everybody's got a suit, and I got a tie. I actually did end up getting the job, but man, it was stressful. I had like hives coming out, I'm trying to hide, I'm sweating, I'm nervous. Guys, always be over-prepared. I'd rather everyone in the room laugh at me when I walk in with my Armani suit, and they're all sitting there in Dickies and a pair of steel-toe boots and t-shirt, because, hey, I'm the one getting the job. So you can go home, and I'll be happy that I've got the job. So guys, over-prepare when in doubt. Knowing the culture of the organization, we've already given you the Facebook example. Kind of knowing what I'm walking into. Getting a feel for who I'm going to interview with, what this type of company is. Look, if you don't want to wear the suit, then there's a section on here called business casual. Wear the khakis and the polo tucked in with your hair combed. That's not overdoing it. It doesn't make you feel insecure. For ladies, it's okay to wear a skirt below your knees and a sweater. But making sure, guys, that you follow this etiquette, okay? We don't want your attention to be pulled away from your questions, right? So for ladies and guys, if I'm wearing something revealing or something too tight, we think, hey, that's great, they're gonna love that. Problem is that they're focusing on things they shouldn't be focusing on and not my answers. And when that panel comes together and says, hey, what'd you think about her or him? I don't remember anything except that your clothes were too tight or that you were dressed inappropriately or things were showing that shouldn't be showing. Jewelry, distracting jewelry, something hanging where my attention keeps coming back to a hoop about this big on your ear. Or the shoes you came in. So making sure, guys, that you follow this, that you make sure if you got face piercings, take them out. It's okay. Remember, it's professional you. You can put them back later. No one's telling you to stop being you. I just want you to be professional you in this interview. You got a tattoo, cover it up. There's makeup for it. You can wear long sleeves. Guys, don't ever give them something to discriminate on you. And that's my philosophy. Look, if you don't want me, then you don't want me. That's fine, because it probably wasn't the right fit for me. But I don't want you to not want me because I have a tattoo in my arm and you have a preconceived notion of what people are like with tattoos. We had a student at this school, and I use it in the resume workshop. Poor Steven's probably hearing the example, is so tired of hearing the example back there, helping with the session. But she was phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. One of the best students I've ever worked with here at the college, was leader of all these different organizations, got her an interview, and the employer got her Facebook, and she was part of Harley Club. And the employer called me up and said, I'm not going to interview her. Because, her Facebook page, she's sitting there on a Harley and leather, and I'm not comfortable with that. I had to fight with this employer for 10 minutes pointing out that everyone that drives a Harley Davidson isn't on the Sons of Anarchy, all right? They're not going to come in and wreck your place and beat you up. That, this is a hobby that people have. The problem is, guys, that 99.99% of the time, I can't fight for you. I can't do that. So making sure that you don't disclose information like extracurricular activities. We've had a guy back in Charleston, we used to set up interviews for our manufacturing graduates, and we would have all these different employers come and interview, and this guy insisted on telling the employers that he was a drummer. He insisted. It was his passion, he loves the drum, and the problem was at the end of the session when we got feedback from the employers, A, he was focused on something that had nothing to do with the job for too long, and B, they all saw a drummer much differently than some of us see drummers. I see drummers as someone that's artistic and likes to play an instrument. They saw a drummer as having a gig at 11 o'clock at night up in Florence, drinking too heavily and not coming to their first shift that starts at 6 a.m. the next day. Drummers aren't like that, but we all have prejudice. We all have ways that we see things, and by you giving anything other than professional you can get you in trouble. And your dress and your appearance and how you smell is also part of that. All right, guys, we're wrapping up. This is the important tips, kind of a wrap-up of everything we've talked about today. Guys, be proud of you. Be proud of your accomplishments. I have people come in my office every day that goes, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get this job. I don't know how I'm going to be a nurse. All I've done, the only thing I've ever accomplished or done, I worked at Applebee's for 10 years. It was just a server position. Well, as an employer, you say, hey, it's just a server position, then I'm going to evaluate it as it's just a server position. I had a boss, poor Steven's heard this example 100 times too. I had a boss back at the food bank in Charleston, and his philosophy was that every job at the food bank had nothing to do with the service industry, but his philosophy was that if you provided such exceptional customer service as a server to pay your bills with your tips, that you could accomplish anything. He didn't care if you were the director of operations or you were working in the warehouse. If you were able to survive based on how good your customer service was for tips, he was interested in working with you in the future because you could learn how to do anything. I can't teach you to be good to people, and I can't put passion in you. So thinking about that, guys, be proud of what you've done. What have you done at a last job, regardless of what it is, that you can bring to my job? I promise you, if you think critically, there is something you can pull from everything. I have 10 years of service industry experience, line cooking, serving, bartending, busboying, dishwashing, and I bring that to every interview, and to the day I die I will, because the way I treat you, my passion for helping others came from someone yelling at me for not bringing their ranch. All right, so guys, I still use it today, and I'm gonna use it. You guys have to think about what you've accomplished and use it. Always remain positive when describing former work experiences. Did you guys hear that? Have I said that at all today? Stay positive. I know you might hate your old boss. I know you had a nemesis at your last job, but don't let the employer know that, all right? What did you learn from that bad experience that you can bring to my company? Guys, when in doubt, once again, overdress for success. No one is ever going to penalize you for overdoing it, all right? I know there's a few exceptions to the rule, but in reality, the suit is the way to go. And when you come to interview for Wendy's, if you're coming next week, it's a management position, making sure that you come dressed the part. Problem is, you're going to be just like me if you don't. And you're going to show up in the polo and the khakis, or you're going to show up in the t-shirt and jeans, and everyone else in that line waiting the group interview is going to be in a suit. All right? And it's about your competition. So making sure that you're the diamond in the rough. Research, research, research. I cannot emphasize how important it is that you know everything about that company before interviewing. Guys, practice makes perfect. It is true in every context in life. You've got to practice, okay? Remain confident. I want someone that's confident. Remember, I don't want someone that's overly confident, but I want to know that you can do the job. I want to know that you can come on board, you're easily trainable, and we can move forward and keep doing what we do. Last slide. Guys, answers should focus on the skills and behaviors identified in the job description. That job description will always be your best friend. As I started this session, I'm ending it this session. Your job description is the most important part of your job search. And knowing that inside and out, but better yet, knowing what you have that's in relation to that job description is so important. And guys, last thing, I cannot emphasize it enough, show passion. Be my Duke Energy guy. Be the person that comes on board and says, I love serving students. My whole life, I have wanted to work at a hospital like this where I can help others. I am committed to selling. I love selling. Guys, think about your passion and sell it. I was on an interview committee, and of 12 or so applicants, only one said they were passionate about serving you guys. That was a major red flag for me. I can teach you anything. I can teach you how to use this computer. I can teach you how to run a manufacturing machine. I can teach you to be an engineer, a nurse, an astronaut, but I cannot make you be passionate, all right? So showing that passion is so critical when it comes time for you guys to interview. Guys, for the folks at home, please, my email address is DJ, as in Daniel Jeffrey, Grigg, Grigg, @gtcc.edu. That's DJ Grigg @gtcc.edu. Or you can click reply to the hundreds of millions of jobs I send to your Titan Live email accounts. Please send me your name and your email address so we can get you in the running for the $25 gift card. Here's the catch for folks at home. If you cannot come to the campus to sign for your card, then we won't be able to give you, and you won't be in the running for that. Either way, folks at home as well, email me so I can send you your certificate to get your extra credit if you have instructors giving it. And that's about it, guys. I think at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions and emphasize one thing before we do questions. Remember, you're not on your own. If you have an interview, we got careerservices@gtcc.edu. You can email that email, and we'll get an experienced advisor to meet with you and prep you for your interview, okay? So don't feel like just because you came here, you're on your own and you won't get one-on-one counseling here at the school. We'll help you mock interview. We'll help you research the company. Whatever we've got to do to prep you, we'll do it. All right, guys, thank you so much. Anything you need, remember, you're not on your own. Let us know, and we're here to help you out. Everybody have a great day. Yay.